Hey, deserving listeners, a few of you asked me to make an episode in which I talked about the movies of 2025 that I watched and liked, and TV shows, I guess. And so I thought I would do that. So if you're looking for psychology content, this episode is not for you. But if you're looking for an old guy talking about movies and TV shows that he likes, then this is right up your alley. So I'm just going to look at my IMDb rating history and just talk about it random. I hopefully rated everything that I saw. I sometimes fail to rate TV shows that I watch, but I think I always will rate movies. It's one of the first things I do when the credits start rolling at a movie theater. Anyway, so this list, I'm realizing, includes things that came out this past year, 2025, but also things that came out long before. Like this first one that I rated most recently, a couple days ago, the movie from 1974 titled Where the Red Fern Grows. So I feel like I just want to talk about Where the Red Fern Grows for a second. When I was a kid, there were only a handful of books that were talked about a lot among people that were around me. I don't know if they were just talking about these books because of me being a boy, or these are the sort of books that they talked. I don't know. But I heard about The Hobbit. I heard about Lord of the Rings. I heard about Shogun in my family, the Japanese angle there, and the TV show in the 80s, but also Where the Red Fern Grows. In fact, I had a teacher in 4th grade who would read this book to us, but we never got all the way through it. And as someone that didn't know he was dyslexic myself, I always wanted to read stories, to consume stories, or enter that world of books, but I struggled reading and still do. And it wasn't until audiobooks were available at the library, because audiobooks are expensive, back in the day when you would buy the cassettes. And when they started coming out in the library, I was like, oh my God, this opens up a whole into the world. And then Audible and blah, blah, blah. And then podcasting. And so before all that, I just knew I really wanted to read this book, Where the Red Fern Grows, because it was very much up my alley. It was about a young boy that was my age at the time when I was wanting to read this book, like in the 4th, 5th grade. And it was about a boy who lives in the country I think it takes place in early 20th century. And this boy really wants 2 hounds to be friends with him. But his parents can't afford the dogs. And so he saves up his money and he gets these 2 hounds, and he goes hunting raccoons with the dogs. But it's more about the process of working hard to get the dogs, the friendship with the dogs, the commitment, the standing by your word. Anyway, so on YouTube the movie is free. If you have, I think you might have to have that premium thing. I don't know if people do that. So I pay that. I don't know how much it is a month, $10, $15, but it is worth it to not have any ads. It's nice. And for those of you who sometimes people say, well, if we pay for premium, then there's no ads, and therefore Kirk isn't going to get any ad revenue. Well, I think I've heard from other YouTubers that the per watch money that we get is actually more for premium people when they click, because your part of your monthly fee goes towards the videos that you watch, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so I think on premium they make certain movies free to you, kind of like Netflix or something. But anyway, so Where the Red Fern Grows, I finally watched it. I've seen clips from it. It's not a good movie. If I were 10, I think I might have liked it, but it's 1974. It kind of plays like a TV movie. It might have even been a TV movie. It's pretty goofy, but it talks the dog. Spoiler alert: the dogs die at the end, and the red fern grows at the graves of the 2 dogs that he loved. and I gave it a 3 out of 10. Anyway, all right, let's go faster through this. I also watched Black Bag, which is a recent movie that just came out with Michael Fassbender and with Kate Blanchett, directed by Steven Soderbergh. It has all the glitz, and I was into it. I was really into it. It's a spy movie. It's sort of like a thinking man's James Bond movie or something. But I thought the script was goofy. It had all the look of a thriller and of a thinker and of a whodunit and of this new kind of angle. And I just thought it was boring and kind of silly. And I gave it a 4 out of 10. I wouldn't recommend it. And so, yeah, 4 out of 10 doesn't mean it's horrible. It just means I prefer to have that hour and a half back. I also, on recommendation from my friend Dave, watched an old anime movie from 1997 called Perfect Blue. I gave it a 6 out of 10. It deserves more than that, but let me explain. So Perfect Blue anime movie, the script and the editing is amazing. I don't know. I'm not a film person, so I don't know the words for it. But even for especially when we consider this was 1997, essentially it's about a woman who is a pop star, and she wants to become an actress. And it's about how exploitative the industry can be to young women in particular. And you just watch her being treated like crap. But what's so genius about the script is that there's a jump cut to the next scene, and you're watching and she's talking with like her agent or something. And there's this gun shootout, and then they zoom out and you realize, oh, she's actually in a movie. We were led to believe that this was a real scene in her real story, the real person. But then, oh no, this is just a thing. And it does that repeatedly, and it does it really well. It's not overly done. It's not cheesy. And it's effective. It's not just a way of directing and writing the script, but it actually is an element of the story in that she herself is starting to lose connection with who she is and when she's acting versus when she's not. And I'm not describing it well, but it's brutal. I mean, it is a trigger warning for rape. I mean, it's tough. It's not. Yeah, it's not even rated. I'm looking at IMDb. Yeah, I would imagine it would be NC-17 if it were rated, because it's not like gory the way that some anime can be in a silly way, but it's brutal, and it doesn't pull any punches, and it doesn't have a happy ending, and it's awful but important. But as in terms of rating it, I didn't know how to rate it, because on one hand it's really effective and like way before its time, or even before it's like I don't know what time would appreciate a movie like this, and yet I did not really enjoy watching it. It also felt a little unrelenting. So there's a line between just rubbing your face in it versus having these kinds of honest elements while keeping it entertaining. Anyway, on to the next movie, Avatar, the Avatar 3, Fire and Ash. I gave it a 4 out of 10. So the internet loves to hate Avatar, but I've never really understood that. I think the first Avatar was in 2010, and I was not on the internet much at that time. I had a podcast, but I didn't look at Twitter or Reddit or YouTube or really anything. So it wasn't until like maybe 5 years later that I suddenly realized that everyone had a love-hate relationship with that first Avatar movie. And I had watched it in 2010, the first Avatar movie, and just thought, yeah, okay, it's fine. It's an interesting movie, whatever. Just sort of a popcorn summer blockbuster sort of movie. But apparently it was a big deal, and there was a backlash that I just completely missed. So I always didn't understand both the love and the hate for this movie. I just thought it was just another movie. So when the second one came out a few years ago, I just went to it thinking like, oh, am I going to hate it the way that everyone seems to hate it in my circle? And I actually liked it. I can't remember what I gave it, but I might have given it a 7, maybe an 8. I don't know. I thought the second Avatar movie was pretty good, pretty solid, kind of long. The ending drags. The action sequences at the end are a little goofy in that Sully, the guy, the main character, his family keeps getting abducted in various different ways in the same scene. Like, oh no, these two kids have been abducted. Oh no, Spider's been abducted. Oh no, the mom's been trapped, and now Sully has to save. It gets a little silly, but the water animation. It's not just the animation. It's a good movie, and it's not the most amazing script, and of course there's the relevant discourse around the white savior and how this maps onto Native American experience and how it plays into the noble savage tropes and the white savior tropes and everything. But at its core, the movie is anti-colonialism and anti-capitalism. It plays into certain problematic tropes, but and it's a pro-environment movie, right? So I went to the third one thinking, maybe it wasn't. I thought the third movie was a drop in quality. I don't know why I say this, but it just seems like a rehashing of the second one. And there's still some amazing scenes. It's way too fucking long. It's 3.5 hours long. Why would an Avatar cartoon need to be 3? It's not The Godfather, for Christ's sake. It's Avatar 3. Cut some shit out of it. Plus, it would cost less to make. And plus so that's what I'll say about that. But it's entertaining. 4 out of 10. Oh my God. So I don't know why I came across this movie, again, free on YouTube, called The Apartment from 1960 with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. So for those of you who know the movie The Apartment, then you don't need me to talk about this. But I'd never heard of it before. And I think I was watching a YouTube movie review person, and they were talking about something like that. And then I looked it up, Googled it on YouTube, and it came up, oh, it's free. I can watch it. So I bookmarked it. And one night I decided to watch it, thinking I might get a little bit into it and get a little bored. But I loved this movie. And for those of you who it's a Billy Wilder movie. For those of you who love this movie, The Apartment, you know. And this is a beloved movie. It's not like I had this. I gave it an 8 out of 10, by the way. So Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, 1960, black and white, rom-com, but also it's racy. I was surprised at how racy was the word my mom would use in terms of it's about sex work, right? No, it's about, I'm trying to remember the plot. Essentially, Jack Lemmon plays this guy who is trying to rise in the ranks of a corporation. And the upper management guys are all cheating, or there's a set of upper management guys that are cheating on their wives, and they don't want to pay for a hotel, and they are telling Jack Lemmon, hey, I can give you a promotion in the future if you let me use your apartment so I can have sex with the secretary that works under me. And it gets into stuff, and there's a moment of suicide, of attempted suicide, and it's taken pretty seriously. So it's a rom-com with a suicide scene, and it's not played for laughs, but there's laughs intermingle. It's a masterful screen play. And Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. I think Shirley MacLaine might have even won an Oscar or something, or she was nominated. But I've seen Shirley MacLaine in a lot of things, particularly later in life, but she is just amazing. So I couldn't recommend it more, The Apartment, if you haven't seen it. It's the Casablanca of rom-coms. Anyway, Zootopia, 7 out of 10. Solid. 7 out of 10 for me means solid movie. Glad I saw it, and I'm glad I saw Zootopia 2. I love Zootopia 1, and I think Zootopia 2, they nailed it. The characters were furthered. It's always this issue of screenwriting with a sequel because there's a story arc to the characters in the first movie, right? So a lot of really hacky screenwriters will just erase the story arc of the characters in the first movie and just start over. Like the Star Wars sequels, 7, 8, and 9 kind of did this. And it might seem like a good movie if you're not really paying attention, if you're just sort of zoned out. But if you start asking, wait, I thought they went through this in the last... Whereas Zootopia 2, they actually furthered it. And they added characters, which is, again, another one of those trope things that screenwriters will do in a sequel. They will, like Stranger Things, it started annoying me by season 4 that, why are we adding 5 more new fucking characters? Like, there's too many people. Either start killing people off. Like, in Stranger Things, I can't remember what season it was. Was it season 2 or 3? I think it was 3, where they moved, half of the crew goes to California. I thought that was okay, that's perfect. That means you can continue the story with a smaller group of people. I figured it would be the California crew, I think, is what and then you wouldn't have to involve Hopper, because I think he's dead anyway, but then they bring him back, spoiler alert. And so with Zootopia 2, they added 2 new characters, and I'm like, but they did it well. And they fleshed those characters out, and I'm pretty sure Zootopia 3 is going to have, instead of 2 main characters, it's going to be 4. And I'm really looking forward to it. The 4 characters, there's a snake and a beaver now, in addition to the fox and the rabbit. And I thought that the team, each character has its own personality and story arc and vulnerabilities. And I think Zootopia 3 should probably be another 7 out of 10. Another movie I'm seeing here, I gave a 1 out of 10 called Regretting You. And all I can say, I don't know why I watched this movie, but it is one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen. I'm just going to read the description here. A mother and daughter must grapple with what's left after a devastating accident reveals a shocking betrayal and forces them to confront family secrets, redefining love, and rediscover themselves. Yeah, it was just, if you're into that kind of thing, great, but I don't think you got good reviews. Another movie from a long time ago, Inglorious Bastards, 2009, Quentin Tarantino, 10 out of 10. I loved this movie when it came out. I rewatched it, loved it still. Sometimes when you rewatch stuff, you're like, but I each scene, Quentin Tarantino is known for really allowing scenes to develop, right? And trust the audience to go along with slow moments so it can build up to something. And within Inglorious Bastards, there's like 5 or 6 different scenes, like the scene when they're in the basement and there's the 3 fingers and this really quick shootout at the end, and then there's sort of a coda where that one guy at the bottom, and anyway. And so there's that whole scene, and then there's just various different scenes that I could just watch just that scene, like the opening scene where Lanza, I think his name is, arrives at that farmhouse and there's the Jewish people that are hiding under the floorboards. Like that whole scene is masterful, but there's a whole bunch of scenes in that movie that are kind of like that. Anyway, if you don't like Quentin Tarantino, then you're not going to like that movie, but I certainly liked it. There's a TV show on this list, but it's just 4 episodes, so it's just a bit longer than Avatar 3. you know, so it's, could be considered a movie, but it's called Death by Lightning. And I think was it a Netflix thing? Yeah. I gave it 9 out of 10. I really liked it. Now, I can't imagine very much. So basically it's a biopic, if you will. Some people call it a biopic, but I'm like, no, it's a biopic, It's about President Garfield and the people around him. And I knew the story, and I'm, a typical dad type who studies history and watches documentaries and stuff like that. And, I knew the summary of, spoiler alert, President Garfield gets murdered pretty shortly into his presidency. And this TV show, this miniseries, is about that. But it's about so much more than that. And again, I knew a lot of the story beats, but to see it so, masterfully written, directed, and acted, it was very satisfying to me. Death by Lightning. I think the name is really bad. Death by Lightning essentially is a quote from actual history. President Garfield was responding to, I think one of his aides was saying, you need to have a security detail when you're walking around in public. And President Garfield was a very down-to-earth guy. And he said, no, if you start worrying about being assassinated, then, you might as well start worrying about being killed by lightning or something like it. It was just a phrase that he was using of just like, you can die any old way, so I'm not going to worry about it. And then they used that phrase as the title of the TV show, which I think is not very good, because the title gives the impression, especially if you see like the poster, you think is this like about Tesla or something? Anyway, but if you like history, the other thing that I'll say about Death by Lightning is that you might benefit from watching a half-hour documentary about President Garfield before you watch the movie, because so many things, like if you don't know who Grant was, if you don't know much about the Civil War, if you don't know much about Reconstruction and Jim Crow and the corruption of the government in the 19th century and kickbacks, and you also have a hard time differentiating between people with various forms of beards. And if you don't know about what was the vice president's name? If you don't know about him, then because they don't really explain a lot of things. But since watching the miniseries Death by Lightning, I've looked more into the story, and because we know a fair amount about the guy who killed President Garfield, and he's a very interesting character. And there was also like a sex cult that was. There was a lot of sex cults in the 19th century. It just opens your eyes to like, our society, our American society has had pockets that are surprising. You just don't think in the late 19th century that there would be these hippie communes where people are having sex with each other. And anyway, it gets into that, but it doesn't explain it, is the thing. So if you watch a documentary and then watch the series, or watch the series and go like, wait, what's that? And then look it up. Like, I think that would help. Anyway, let's take a break. All right, back from the break. I want to remind non-patrons that if you don't want to hear ads, you can become a patron and you don't have to listen to ads. The next movie on my list is Rental Family. This is a recent movie, and I gave it an 8 out of 10. It has Brendan Fraser, and it is written and directed by Hikari, and it's about this white American actor living in Japan, and he gets this gig where he becomes a rental family member, And if you watch the preview, it pretty much explains it. It's a heartwarming movie, but it also, it has some darkness to it. It's interesting. I could see how some people would not like the movie, but I did. And it's not flashy. There's no gun battles or anything. And Brendan Fraser does an amazing job. And it's a look into that culture. I don't think the movie is accurate in terms of what is done in Japan, but I do know that you can rent family members. So the movie takes this thing in Japan that happens that is weird and sort of extends it into an interesting story. But if you don't know, in Japan, you can, for example, rent a family for a day. Like if you have a lonely guy who is lonely and he wants to go to Disneyland, but he doesn't have any, grandkids or something to go with, he can rent a family. He can rent kids and grandkids, and he pays for them, and not only to rent them for the day, but also to rent them, to pay for them to go to Disneyland. And the actors, I think, are told not to just go completely overboard, but, to essentially be there as pseudo family members, and from the outside, you're just like, what the fuck? And yeah, loneliness, right? But also it's kind of sweet, right? Because it's not renting people to have sex with them or something. It's renting people to hang out with and have friends. And as long as everyone's, safe, then it's a win-win, right? The family gets to go to Disneyland and they get to earn money, and the lonely guy gets a family for the day. Obviously there's a better way to cure loneliness, but, in a pinch. Anyway, I don't know much about that whole world, but I do know that it is a thing and has been a thing for a really long time. Japan has, the way I think about Japan is that, I live in Seattle, and since the Pacific Ocean is basically, unpassable in terms of traversing it until recent times, when you think about culture, the further you get away from home, the more different the culture becomes, right? So you can't get further away from Seattle than Japan, because you have to go all the way across the United States. You have to go across the Atlantic Ocean. You have to go across Europe, across Asia, across China, all the way to Japan. Because, there's so many things about Japanese culture as a Japanese American that I'm like, my God, that is just a completely different way of looking at things. Some good, some bad, And if you know about milk maids or milk cafes, I think they're called. I when I was in Japan, I actually went to one. It was really bizarre. These waitresses dress up in these like French maid outfits, but they're actually pretty conservative. Like, there's no cleavage or anything. It's very prim and proper, but it's also, they dote on you. They call you master. In Japanese, they're just like, hello, master. Can I get you anything, master? And they laugh at all your jokes. And again, it's there for a lot of guys who are lonely. But it's also kind of like Hooters in a way, but it isn't as sexy. Or I don't know. If you know, you know. But there's so many things like this in Japan. You're just like, what in the world? But, you could look at our society and go like, well, we have our things as well that are what in the world. I rewatched Encanto because I initially liked it, but Berto did not like it. And I watched someone on YouTube reviewing the movie talking about how it wasn't a good movie. So I rewatched it. And yeah, I guess upon rewatching it, I realized that it's the script. Apparently, the rumor or what's been told is that the script was written and they were pretty far into production, and then for whatever reason they decided to scrap like half of the story, and they quickly had to tie things in. But there's all this setup at the beginning of the movie that doesn't pay off. And when I watched it the second time, I was like, yeah, this is really disjointed. It's such a missed opportunity. But yeah. And also the point of the movie is kind of weird. It's like, wait, what is this? But I will say when I watched it the first time, it worked on me. So I don't know what that is. On to another Pixar, right? They're both Pixar. Moana 2, my God, what a terrible movie. Moana 1 is one of the best movies I've ever seen, let alone one of the best cartoons or Pixar. Moana 2 is so bad. If you liked Moana 2, great. I'm happy. It's not like... I don't know. It's not offensive, the movie, but I don't know. I don't know what it was about the script that just did not work. But the first movie is so perfect. the whole storyline, the villain at the end, if in quotes, Moana 2, I'm just like, it felt like it was, because Moana 1 is a made for kids movie, but it's absolutely made for adults too. Parents and kids can both get into it from different angles, overlapping angles. Moana 2 seems like it was just made for 5-year-olds. There's a certain, if you have kids and you've watched, TV shows and movies that are made for 5-year-olds, not always, but often it's nonsensical, and very simple, right? And you just need a lot of fart jokes and butt jokes and stuff, and the kids are entertained. Moana 2 is that, and it's bizarre because you think, because I subsequently after watching it, I watched YouTube, reviewers of the movie, and they were saying that Moana 1, I think is the most streamed movie. It's the most like profitable movie Disney has ever had in the history of Disney, or something like that. And to just drop the ball with Moana 2, and more, I think it's due to executives interfering, because scriptwriters know how to write scripts, and they spend their whole lives learning that craft about how to have plot and how to set things up and how to have payoffs and how to show this happens, so this happens instead of this happens and then this happens, if you know the whole thing. Anyway, Moana 2 is horrible, which led me to watch another movie to cleanse the palate, Tangled. I've watched Tangled, I don't know, 100 times. I give it a 10 out of 10. I love this movie when it came out in 2010, and with time, it even gets better, particularly after watching Moana 2, made by essentially the same kind of studio, right? Disney, Pixar. Is Tangled Pixar? I think Tangled is just Disney. Anyway, Tangled is a perfect movie. It's funny, it's interesting, has a good storyline. The characters I'm rooting for them. Everything's perfect. The animation, the horse is hilarious. I cry, I laugh. The villain is perfect. It's perfect. Perfect movie. I rewatched Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. Is that the first one? I think it is the first one. Yeah. And I gave it a 4 out of 10. I remember liking it back in the day. And, these are beloved movies, so I feel like I'm being a dick. But I don't know. It's not for me. 4 out of 10, it's not horrible. It's not a 1. It's not a Moana 2. But I wish I had that. What's actually 2.5 hours long. So I watched Fantastic Four, the new Fantastic Four movie that came out in 2025, in the theaters. But I was a little tired from doing that workshop that I did for Dr. K a while back, because I did the workshop in the day, and then as a way to wind down, I watched the movie with some friends at the movie theater. And I think I might have dozed off at the end of the movie. I'm starting to do that in my old age. I never used to fall asleep in movie theaters. It would always astound me. Stacy, my wife, would fall asleep, especially in a movie like Lincoln, which I totally understand. But I could be really tired, and yet I would never fall asleep in a movie theater. It just doesn't feel like a place that I would nod off in. I'm a napper, so I'm prone to falling asleep in the middle of the day, but something about the movie theater and movies that just gets the heart going. But that has stopped. Now, if I'm tired, especially if the movie's a little boring, which Fantastic Four was, so I rewatched it at home to see what I had missed, and I had missed a good portion of the ending, and I gave it a 5 out of 10. It was fine. It's fine. It's interesting to watch. The look of it is interesting. The style is interesting. The story is kind of interesting, I guess. But I'm just tired of these Marvel or comic book storylines involving essentially magic, right? There was a time when Batman just got the bad guy, the criminal, or Superman saved the Lois Lane as she's falling from a helicopter. So now it always has to involve like multiverses and, because Fantastic Four, the bad guy, is Galactus. And I've always hated Galactus because Galactus is essentially a god. And when you start having gods in your stories, you lose the connection and you lose any sort of believability or stakes, because if a god can just like snap their fingers and kill everyone. Now, Thanos, I thought they did that well. Essentially a god, right? Thanos could snap his fingers and kill half of the universe. But somehow they made that work, and that's hard to do. But I feel like people are expecting that kind of thing. They don't. Like, I liked Ant-Man 1 because Ant-Man 1 didn't involve multiverses or the quantum universe or, timelines or, galaxy-ending villains. It was just a small little story. But a lot of people didn't like Ant-Man 1 because of that reason. They're like, I don't know. So, who am I? Another recent movie I watched is House of Dynamite, which is the new movie by Catherine Bigelow, director. And it is, I gave it, what did I give it? I gave it an 8, which maybe I would give it a 7. But this movie is not for everyone. But essentially the movie is just like a Law and Order episode about the nuclear systems of the Russians and the United States. So, that we have a bunch of nuclear warheads that are ready to go. And there's this whole monitoring system, satellites and radar and stuff, to see when there are going to be attacks. And the problem is that once you see the missiles in the sky, then you just know that New York is going to be dead. Everyone there is going to be dead. So you have this choice you have to make. Do you annihilate the Russians out of retaliation, or what's that going to prove? Does it help any? And so I'm not describing it well, but you understand. And I grew up as in the 80s of this very real threat, but we still have that very real threat, and this movie depicts that. And the movie is just a lot of conversations between staff members and analysts and military people, and it is kind of like a modern day, The Day After, if you're familiar with that whole thing. And it alerts you to just how close we are at this moment to annihilating the human race still, and how mistakes on radar could result in everyone dying on the planet. And it does it realistically. And if you're into this sort of thing, then you're into this sort of thing. But if you're not, then you're not. And it doesn't have, it's not like a James Bond movie. There's no guns from my memory. There's no like hero. It's just like, and it's sort of told in the Rashomon style where there's different chapters from different points of view from the same timeline. Anyway, but I thought it was a good movie. It's kind of up my alley. Let's take a break. All right. Back from the break. I should say that there's a lot of movies that are out right now that I plan on seeing because it's Oscar season. Like Marty Supreme and what other movies? There's just a lot of other movies that Hamnet I haven't seen. A lot of movies that people are talking about that are awesome. And I just want to tell you I haven't seen those movies. So I'm sorry about that. So I watched The Perfect Neighbor, which is a documentary, Netflix. And if you watched my series on YouTube, I reacted to the whole documentary and tried to figure out what was wrong with the woman in question. And I think it's a really good movie. It's hard to watch because it's real, man. Like it's basically 90% of the movie is police body cam footage, and it effectively tells a story from that body cam footage and also 911 calls. And on one hand, and I said this during my reaction videos, on one hand, it's important to see, I think, on a certain level. On the other hand, it's gripping and entertaining. On the other hand, it feels exploitative because there are kids that are not blurred out, that are finding out that their mom has died, spoiler alert, and they really linger on this one kid. And, it's all body cam footage, but heartbreaking is all, how many deaths have we seen in movies and TV shows? You know what I mean? And this documentary, it really just brings you into that moment. And it's hard to watch. And I wouldn't recommend people watch it if you're sensitive to that kind of triggering or something. Like, it's that intense. You don't see blood. You don't see the gun shot. You don't see the gun, I don't think. But you see the very quick aftermath. And it's terrifying in a certain way. But I ultimately gave it a 6 out of 10 because it's hard for me to rate a movie that I'm reacting to professionally, right? Because I'm not just watching it through. I'm like pausing it every 5 seconds. But as a documentary, 90 minutes, I thought, I don't know, I guess I just know this world too well in reality that watching this, like if I wasn't in my profession, I think this movie would have been more quote unquote entertaining, whatever that means. And that's kind of what I'm basing these numbers on, is like how entertaining it was, not like, I don't know, it's sort of hard to describe how I rate movies, but typically it's on an entertainment metric, whatever that means, right? Anyway, but I gave it 6 out of 10. I rewatched Apocalypto from 2006, the Mel Gibson movie. There's a lot of, if you don't know, this is essentially a historical fiction, or a, what do you call it, a period piece from the Mayan kingdom and in the 16th century, I think, pre-colonialism. And the movie has a lot of political, especially when you think Mel Gibson, and it's got a lot of problems apparently, and I can understand that, and the historical accuracy is not there. Like, there's some historical accuracy. There's also a lot of things that are just sort of thrown together into the same movie. And the way it ends is, I don't know, it depends on what it looked at in a certain way. Apocalypto is a horrible movie when it comes to historical accuracy. But I watched some documentaries about this movie and thought, okay, well, maybe, I don't know, if you just look at it from a certain direction. But in terms of entertainment value, I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think when I originally watched it in the movie theaters in 2006, I probably gave it a 7 out of 10 because it's pretty gripping. It's pretty suspenseful, or, it's essentially this guy's trying to get away from these bad guys. And he's, kind of like Rambo First Blood or something in a way. And, it's action packed, but it also gives us a glimpse into a certain angle of the Mayan society as it was collapsing. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I might even lower it to 5 now that I think about it, because it's, yeah, I think some people really like this movie. I remember mostly liking it when I saw it when it came out. Upon rewatching it, I'm just like, yeah, another movie that I kept hearing people talk about is, I think you pronounce it Sisu, Sisu. It's from 2022. I think it was nominated for an Oscar, like one of the more, not like Best Picture or something. And I think is it a Polish movie? I can't remember where it's World War II, Nazis, and Finland. So the movie is Finnish, with Finnish directors and actors and everything, and it's kind of like a Rambo First Blood movie. Actually, you have this guy at the center of it that's sort of thrust into war, and he doesn't really want to be there, but he's a old grizzled veteran, and they messed with the wrong guy. And yeah, if I was Finnish, I would love this movie, but it's it's a little one-dimensional. Some people really like this kind of thing, and I don't. I gave it 4 out of 10. It was watchable, but there's a new one I think out right now, Sisu 2. If you like just pure action movies, like Machete, or what's another just like pure action movie? I guess Mad Max, but Mad Max has a story and has heart to it. Sisu, there are these women that are kind of cool that add a level of heart to the movie, but it's just a lot of like bullets and heads and people blowing up and stuff. And it's just, I don't know. You'd think I like Inglorious Bastards, I like Reservoir Dogs, I like Mad Max is one of my favorite movies. I liked Furiosa. I love these movies. So why wouldn't I like Sisu? I don't know. Oh my God, y'all. K-pop Demon Hunters, loved it. Apparently one of our patrons or one of our listeners worked on this movie. I don't know if I told you all that. She emailed. She was one of the animators, I believe. And yeah, 8 out of 10. Love this movie. I've watched it 3 times. It's funny, entertaining. The music is good. It has a really good story, and I loved it. And I don't like K-pop, so because I'm 55 and I've heard of Led Zeppelin. Okay, we have to talk about Weapons, the movie. I gave it a 1 out of 10. Look, I've watched a lot of reviewers, both in print and on YouTube, talking about their top 10 movies of 2025, and Weapons is always in the top 10 or top 5, maybe even their favorite movie. I don't understand. Now, what I have to say is I don't like horror. I've just realized that there's this whole genre of movie that people love. Bertle loves horror. Bertle, I'm sure, loved Weapons, actually. I'm pretty sure he did. A lot of people that I respect loved Weapons. Consider it like a really funny, important, good movie. And I don't know what it is. When I'm watching it, I'm like, and I liked the beginning. I liked the first like sequence when we're sticking with the teacher. And then, because it's told from different angles, different characters, different people that we focus on in the same timeline. And, similar to the other movie I was talking about. What was I talking about? Anyway, the first couple sequences I liked, but then it just, when we get to the principal and the burnout kid who lives in town, I'm thinking, why are we focusing on them? And then it just devolves into a typical horror movie. Now, if you're into horror, then it's great, right? It's like, now I will say that the writer-director is from The Whitest Kids You Know, which I'm a big fan of. And I wanted to like it because of that. But yeah. Now, I don't know why I like other movies that are considered horror, like Midsommar. I loved that movie. The Witch, I loved that movie. I loved Get Out. That's kind of in the horror genre, right? I love The Exorcist, the first one. I sort of liked The Ring, but I don't know if yeah. So I don't know. There's just certain tropes that horror will use where I'm just thinking. So I'll just tell you the premise that as soon as it's revealed, it loses me just entirely. Where the evil presence or character or something, as soon as it's established that the evil presence or character is essentially a magical god, then it takes me out of the story, because you have a god that's dealing with mortals, and the god can do anything, and you're helpless, as your protagonists can't get out of that. And that's the whole thing, right? That's what makes it scary. It's like, oh my God, this witch or this god or this character can do any. It's sort of when Friday the 13th, when is it Michael Myers, when he just suddenly transports ahead of you and he's like in the house and you're like, there's a jump scare. It's like, wait, so how did he get there? And you think about it, you're like, oh, so he's a god. He can teleport. Or It, where you have a clown that can do whatever it wants to. Now for horror people, they dig that. For me, there's something about that it just loses me because I don't care anymore because the god can do anything. And Weapons kind of has that. And also, I'm not a fan of like physical body gore humor / horror elements. And there's this thing with a fork I won't talk about, but I was just like, oh my God, do we have to watch that? So if you're a horror fan and you loved Weapons, you're just like, my God, Kirk, you don't understand. Da, da, da. Yeah, I don't understand. And I think what really kind of pushed me over the edge is Stacy hates horror. So I think over the years, I've just become more like her. And I just wish I never watched Weapons. And I wish, so here's the thing. Like this all started like 10 years ago with Let the Right One In, if you're familiar. And Berto and all my friends would be like, Kirk, I know you're not into horror, but this one isn't horror. It's like completely different. It's like this riff or like Hereditary or something. And they're like, oh, you got to watch it. It's like art. It's like art horror. You would like it. And then I'd watch it and I'd be like, it's better made than like your typical Friday the 13th movie, but it's still a fucking horror movie. And I fucking hate horror movies. And I did not like it. And so my relationship so this is a personal thing because, well, of course it's personal, but the part of it that I want to talk about is how I feel I have distress from not liking things that other people love. I feel bad. I feel maybe I'm missing something, like I'm stupid. Everyone loves this. People I respect loved Weapons. I hated this movie. I was okay with the first half hour. I was like, okay, I'm into it. It's getting interesting. Where did the kids go? It's, blah, blah, blah. And there's sort of societal elements in this stuff. But as the movie went on, I was like, oh my God, what the and then I think about the plot and I'm like, what? It's just, and the sort of jump scare, shock, vomiting blood on someone's face. I was like, God, Jesus. And so I feel bad. I feel like I'm uncultured. I feel like I'm stupid. I feel like I'm not watching it right. I feel like I'm biased. I feel like I'm not part of the crowd. And it's the same with The Lighthouse. I don't understand. But then, on these reviewers in the top 10 movies, a lot of them are putting one battle after another as their favorite movie of 2025, which I couldn't agree with more. So you'll have all these people be like, oh my God, this movie and this movie. Like, yes, yes, yes. And then all of a sudden they put Weapons in there. I'm like, what? How? So there's something wrong with me. That's the point. And I don't like that, but I can't avoid it. I've tried. And so what I have to do now, because I always watch movies based on recommendations, right? I rarely just put a movie on without knowing. And so I'm going off of Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic or Friends or critics that I respect. And what I think I just have to realize is that when it comes to horror movies, even if it's considered, it's totally different from horror, that it's in all likelihood this anomalous thing for me that I won't like it. And if I just never watched Weapons, I'd be like, well, maybe it would be in this liminal space of like, maybe I would like it, maybe I won't, but I don't want to open that Schrodinger's box, and I just want to keep it that way. And I need to start doing that because that's a better place to be than having watched it and having to tell everyone around me when they ask me that I didn't like it and for them to look at me like I'm some sort of uncultured asshole or something. I don't know. Another movie I rewatched recently is But I'm a Cheerleader, which is a classic from 1999. I saw it in the theater back then. I've rewatched it a few times. It's a quaint little movie. It's really great. A young Natasha Lyonne. It also has RuPaul in it. And it's about a pray away the gay kind of camp that Natasha Lyonne is a lesbian and she's sent there, and it was good. I gave it 8 out of 10. I think I gave it 8 out of 10 when I watched it back in 1999. Okay, here's another one of those movies, 28 years later. So again, people love this movie. I did not. I gave it a 2 out of 10. There's some watchable parts, but similar to horror movies, gory zombie movies, I'm not a fan of that either, I guess. 28 years later definitely is trying to do something more noble than a typical zombie movie, for sure. I mean, there's a bit at the end that I thought was pretty amazing, actually. Not the ending, but the climax of the movie. And I still think about that sometimes, the mom and what she decides to do. And yet, like, getting to that point, I'm just like, okay, it's not unwatchable. I guess I just was, I don't know what I was hoping for. But similarly, when I admit that I don't like this movie, everyone's just like, I don't know, do you not understand art? I just get this look from people like I'm like a dullard or something. like I don't, like I looked at Picasso and said, like, that's not realistic. I feel like I get a look of that from people where they think I don't understand. You don't understand, Kirk. 28 years later, and Weapons are masterpieces, and you're an idiot for not liking these. I don't know. Maybe I just shouldn't talk about. I rewatched Wreck-It Ralph, 9 out of 10. I think I might have bumped it from an 8 to a 9. I'm not sure, but I rewatched that movie, I think maybe for the third time. Again, perfect movie. I cry. I laugh. The two main characters are perfectly written. It gets kind of dark when Wreck-It Ralph like smashes the car. It's brutal, and it's such, and the twists and how the scriptwriter managed to make it video game. It's a very video game story, right? Because they live in video games. That's the whole premise, and it lives in this world and uses that world to make a really good story. Sort of like Toy Story, how they didn't just make toys they didn't just animate toys and give them, souls and agency to have them do a typical story. They like made it a toy story, and Wreck-It Ralph made it a video game, an 80s video game story. And it pays off perfectly. And the animation is amazing, the glitches and stuff. It's just, and the candy in Candyland, like the way the candy shines, everything is just so good. And one battle after another. I gave 8 out of 10. I might bump that up to 9. Maybe I will. I'll do that right now. The more I think about this movie, and I've watched it again, I've watched it a second time, watched it in theater, watched it at home. And yeah, it's an experience. I could see how some people would be like, I don't get why everyone likes this movie. There's some movies like Tangled. I don't understand how someone couldn't like Tangled. I don't see how someone couldn't like Wreck-It Ralph. I can see how someone couldn't like One Battle After Another. I can absolutely see that. I could see how some people might not like K-pop Demon Hunters if that doesn't. I'm looking through my list of things. A Death by Lightning, I gave a 9 out of 10. I could absolutely see people watching that and being bored or not understanding what the premise is. But when it comes to One Battle After Another, I think it's maybe made for a particular kind of person. I don't know. If you haven't watched it, understand that it's not strictly in reality. It's like adjacent to reality. It exaggerates things. It's like maybe it could happen, but it's not. It's written in a way to be almost like a cartoon, and it's based on a book. And I don't know anything about the book, but the book was written, I don't know, decades ago. So and Paul Thomas Anderson updates the story for today's world. Anyway, it worked on me, and the Johnny Greenwood score. I'm always kind of laugh. I don't know, when people praise the score. I'm often thinking, yeah, okay, but this score is unique, interesting, classic, yet modern. The ending sequence at the end, I'm getting chills thinking about it with the road. And like, this is an instant classic. And I loved it. 9 out of 10. I watched the Netflix documentary about John Benet Ramsey called Cold Case, Who Killed John Benet Ramsey. I watched this after Berto walked me through the deep dive, and I gave it a 5 out of 10. It was fine. You know, I don't know. Maybe I wasn't really amazed by it because Berto had told me all the details. I apparently rated an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I gave it 10 out of 10. This is the Thanksgiving episode where it's called The Gang Squashes Their Beefs. This is when they're at Dennis and Mac's apartment and they invite everyone over. I think it's for Thanksgiving. And this is like, she's mashing it. You know, Gail the Snail and just and Rickety Cricket. And just, it's, I've probably seen that episode 100 times, and apparently I rewatched it on October 15, 2025, and decided to just rate that one episode. I rewatched Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. I think I originally had given that maybe an 8 or 9 when I watched it in the theater. I have rewatched the movie a few times since then, and every time I watch it, particularly when after watching Episode 9, if Episode 9 really nailed it, I think Episode 8, the problems with it would have been forgiven by me. But since a lot of the problems with Episode 8 became kind of amplified in Episode 9, it makes Episode 8 look worse, like way worse. And so I gave it a 4 out of 10. You know, this movie was, a lot of people hated it. You know, and it has some pretty funny moments, like where Princess Leia is like levitating through space. I think I was on a high from Episode 7, which I also rewatched and downgraded. I'm pretty sure I would have given that a 10 out of 10. Because I was, you know, at the time in 2015, I was so craving a story, a Star Wars movie that felt Star Wars-y to me, that gave me that feeling as a kid. And Episode 7 did. Now, it's no wonder because it's essentially a remake of Episode 4. But I thought it was a really good start to the franchise moving forward. But my God, did they drop the ball. The script, like management, they should have had just one person writing all 3 scripts. The way the whole thing, I don't need to rehash it. Everyone talks about it. I've talked about it before. But yeah, upon rewatching Episode 7, I downgraded it to a 5. Because it just, I don't know. I rewatched The Perfect Storm from 2000 and gave it a 3 out of 10. This is the one with like George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg. And it's a true story about these fisher guys that die at sea during a storm. I rewatched Midsommar. I think maybe in an attempt to like say, am I normal? You know, I hate horror and loved it. Midsommar, it has character. You know, I will say that at the very end, there's this one shot of this, you know, I don't think it's spoiling anything to say that there's a body that is like dismembered. And that one shot almost took me out of the movie where I'm like, here we go, horror. But there's this one scene where Florence Pugh is crying and the cult member girls are crying with her. And the set design, and I'm Swedish, so it has like some Swedish folk art energy to the whole thing, and I don't know, 8 out of 10. I rewatched Miller's Crossing, Coen Brothers movie. I remember seeing this back in the day. I don't think I watched it in the theater, but I probably rented it on VHS in the early 90s, and I remember liking it, but I had completely forgotten what this movie was about. Rewatched it, 8 out of 10. Tron, the new Tron movie, Tron Ares, I gave an 8 out of 10. A lot of people hated this movie, and a lot of people hate, what's his face? Jared Leto. it's mainly a Greta Lee movie, and I thought she did an amazing well. I thought she did amazing. I am a huge Tron freak. The first Tron movie came out and was, I was of the age where I would love this movie. I was, playing Atari, and I love, I was a nerd. I liked computers, and I don't know how old I would have been, maybe 12 or 13, when the first Tron movie came out, it worked on me, and I was the perfect person to watch it. And still like it because of that. It's sort of like, the pop music that you heard when you were 15. Like I like early Madonna, and if I were older or younger, I probably wouldn't like early Madonna. You know what I mean? And so I like the first Tron movie. If I was an adult when the first Tron movie came out, I probably would have thought it was a goofy kid movie. I don't know. But when Tron Legacy came out, like 15 years ago, 2010, I was really looking forward to it. I'm like, oh, they're updating it. And I did not like that movie. Gave it a 3 out of 10. I rewatched it, actually, in preparation for Tron Ares, and liked it even less. The script, it just, I was like, what is happening? Tron Ares, the script makes sense. Now, the technology in Tron Ares is way in the future. They essentially can just create anything in the real world. If they want to make a tank or something that levitates, then they just have a 3D printer that makes it. And that's absurd. But I don't know. If you go with, as long as you just say, okay, put away my disbelief on that, then I thought it was a pretty good movie. I gave it an 8 out of 10. It worked on me. And I think it's because of the fact that it really, my dogs are barking, I think it really builds on that first Tron movie. And I think it, because I loved it. If I didn't know Tron and I watched Tron Ares, then I'm guessing I would think it was pretty goofy or just a meh movie. But Tron Ares was made specifically for me. And there's an Asian at the center, Asian American. All right, this episode's going on pretty long, so let's go faster. I'm realizing that I rate a lot of movies and TV shows, and I'm at my October 2025, working my way backwards. So if I go at this pace, this episode will be 4 hours long. So let's go faster. I rewatched a 2007 movie called The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. That's the title of the movie. Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck and what's his face, Sam Rockwell and others. And I love this movie. Again, I think it's sort of a dad type movie. It's based on history. 9 out of 10. I've watched this movie probably 3 or 4 times. It's 2.5 hours long. I would imagine most people wouldn't like this movie. It's too slow. The characters, might not really like, but I don't know. I remember when I watched it the first time, halfway through the movie, I was like, this movie is stupid. I don't understand. And then the ending, I'm like, oh. And then I watched it like a second time and thought, oh, I see. There's certain movies where I think it's sort of like Everywhere, Always at Once, whatever. That movie, the first time I saw it, I really liked the first half. And the second half, I'm like, what is happening? This is so silly. Like butt plugs and shit and hot dog fingers. Like this is like, this is like I don't know. This is so stupid, So I still loved the first watching for the first 2/3 of the movie. I rewatched that movie and knew what I was getting into and liked it a lot more. Just realize it's similar to other kinds of movies where it kind of helps to know that it's going to go in a particular direction. Anyway, that's what the Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And again, it's based on history. I've watched a bunch of documentaries about that whole story because Jesse James and Robert Ford were real people. And it's kind of like Death by Lightning because you have we tend to think of today's people as being narcissistic and selfies and Twitter and blogging and da-da-da. Humans have always been this way. And the guy who killed President Garfield, there's a lot of relatable narcissism or clout, thirst that is involved, and Robert Ford same. Anyway, I rewatched Cool Hand Luke. Speaking of audiobooks, the very first audiobook that I checked out from the library, I was just going through the downtown Seattle library, the big one, and I was with other people because I would never go to a library by myself because I'm dyslexic and I didn't know it at the time, but I was just, wandering around while my friends were actually checking out books. And I came across this one shelf that, you could check out audiobooks. And I was like, oh, wait, this is for me. And it was just like one shelf at the time. And I don't know why, but I grabbed Cool Hand Luke. I had no idea what it was about, or I had never seen the movie from 1967 with Paul Newman. And I loved the audiobook. I was like, oh, and it's not even that great of a book, but because it's an audiobook and because I'm dyslexic, it was like I was finally able to read a book. And so I subsequently watched the movie, Cool Hand Luke, and have watched it a few times, and I watched it in October, apparently, and gave it a 7 out of 10. It's not for everyone, but it's a classic. I rewatched Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. Gave it a 6 out of 10. It's fine. The Acolyte, the TV show, the Star Wars one, I tried to like it. It has some good elements and some bad elements. I gave it a 2 out of 10, ultimately because, I don't know, I just thought this like halfway thinking about the story, and it just felt rushed. It felt like if the screenwriter had twice the amount of episodes, it could have been a good show. Like there was definitely a story there, but it just, I didn't understand what it was trying to say. Anyway, and it has some pretty cool scenes in it. Some pretty good lightsaber battles actually, and it has some pretty interesting elements that I think about sometimes. Like the guy, if you saw the Acolyte, the Jedi he feels guilty and he has put himself into kind of a trance and he can't be attacked, so it's sort of like a hunger strike sort of a thing. And that was a fascinating concept that I don't think is inspired by any other previous Star Wars thing. And the writers that came up with that, it's like, oh, but the delivery of it and the makeup and the beard the kid was wearing, and I don't know, it had a lot of elements like that. And, the witches and the twins, there were so many elements where like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then, well, wait, what? The place burned down? It's made out of stone. Anyway, I rewatched The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, 2008. Again, Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett, Tilda Swinton, David Fincher movie. And I thought I would hate this movie because it's sort of the time. Because in 2008, right, you have CGI graphics and you have... It's very weird, right? Because you have Brad Pitt face that is made to look old, but on a baby, And I think I liked this movie when it first came out. I think it was nominated for an Oscar, at least a few. And I rewatched it and said, yeah, it's fine. It's 6 out of 10. I think it's fine. It's a fine movie. I rewatched Logan's Run from 1976. I rewatched Logan's Run probably once every year or a couple years since I could rent it on a VHS in the 80s. And I do not recommend this movie. It is super goofy and nonsensical and and of its time, or even maybe not even of its time, because 1976, we're starting to get into Star Wars times. The graphics and the effects and everything, it's pretty dated. But it works on me because when I saw this movie as a kid, probably I watched it on TV as a 9-year-old or something. I didn't know really what I was watching, but just all the element, because there wasn't sci-fi. There wasn't much that you could watch As in the 70s, you had the 3 channels and PBS, maybe 3.5 channels. And there just wasn't much to watch. And if anything came on that was mildly in your wheelhouse, like you really latched onto it. And that's what Logan's Run was for me. I have a poster in my room of it. 7 out of 10. But I don't stand by the movie. I watched, let's see, I'm looking at my thing here. I watched The Adjustment Bureau from 2011 with Matt Damon and Emily Blunt and gave it a 2 out of 10. I don't remember why I did not like this movie, but I just didn't. The Netflix documentary Unknown Number, the high school catfish story, I did a reaction video series to that. I actually gave that an 8 out of 10. So even though I was pausing it throughout, I thought that this documentary was, on the scale of entertainment, I gave it an 8 out of 10 because it's pretty interesting. I rewatched Judge Dredd from 1995 with Sly Stallone and gave it a 4 out of 10. It's, dated and it's fine, watchable. I think some people love this movie. I don't know. I rewatched Shazam from 2019. And I think I downgraded. I think I really liked this movie when it first came out. I rewatched it and gave it 6 out of 10. It's fine. It's if you don't have anything to watch, it's entertaining. I watched in the theater with my wife The Naked Gun with Liam Neeson and what's her name? Pamela Anderson. And gave it a 6 out of 10. A lot of people are saying this is like, this amazing movie because it's a return to the old form of comedies. And I respect it for that, like just make a semi-high budget comedy that's just comedy. It's just goofy. And you don't see a lot of those movies anymore. And I appreciate it's watchable, but I wouldn't say it was better than other comedies, or as good as other comedies that I can think of, like Elf. But it's good, and I chuckled probably 20 to 30 times, which what more could you ask for from a comedy? I rewatched the Flash movie from 2023, the one with the problematic Ezra Miller. And people hate this movie. I like it. I gave it an 8 out of 10. It works on me. I understand why some people think it's pretty goofy and how the writing is bad and how Ezra Miller is annoying. I get that, but I don't know. That movie works on me. I rewatched Tombstone from 1993. This is a beloved movie to a particular kind of person. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer. I've had a really weird relationship with this movie. Okay, so when it first came out in 1993, I saw it in the theater and thought it was good. And then I rewatched it maybe 10 years ago and hated it. I thought, my God, what was I thinking? This movie is so silly. It's so cheesy and just, it's really up its own ass. And thought, but, so many people talk about this movie and how great it is. A lot of people that are maybe 10 years younger than me talk about Tombstone as their favorite movie of all time. And I just thought, what is going on? Yeah, Val Kilmer is amazing. I'll Be Your Buttercup, that whole thing, classic. But I was like, okay, maybe I should just rewatch it and just try to take it for what it is. Rewatched it and loved it. And weird, right? That I would love it, then hate it, then love it. Is that because I'm aging? Is it because of the landscape of movies now? Like a lot of Westerns really take themselves too seriously, like that, Power of the Dog or whatever. I felt like that movie, it's like every movie's trying to be too artsy. Or Tar, I didn't really like either. I know people love that movie, but it's just like, I don't know. So that was another one of those movies where I just feel like I'm an idiot for not like similar to Lighthouse. Tar, I was like, what? This movie, what am I supposed to be grabbing onto? There were a couple scenes where I'm like, oh, okay, we're getting into it. Anyway, there's an Australian movie that's a Australian Western, if you will, called The Proposition, and it has a Guy Pearce in it, Ray Winstone, Emily Watson, written by Nick Cave, by the way, who also is in it, I think. But When I saw this movie in 2005, I loved it. I think I might have given it a 9 out of 10. So I was like, ooh, I need to rewatch the movie. I rewatched it and gave it a 6 out of 10. I thought it was fine. It's a good movie. It's gritty. It's dark. It's a Western. I rewatched Black Panther and loved that. I didn't love it as much as everyone else loved it when it first came out. I rewatched it and thought, yeah, it's a 7. But a lot of people were talking about it like it was a 10. And I remember thinking, yeah, it's an 8. I don't have to agree with everybody, but I rewatched it and thought, like, why did I love this movie so much? 7, but 7, it's great. It's a great movie. And, R.I.P. to Chadwick Boseman. Really sad story there. Minecraft movie. Look, I'm not a kid, so I did not like this movie. 3 out of 10. There are moments, especially the beginning of the movie. I was into it. I was like, oh, this is a 6 or 7. And then it gets into the action Minecraft portion. And, I think if I were 14 or 10 and I played Minecraft, I think I would love this movie as I should. But I'm an old man and I like Minecraft. I've played Minecraft, but, Jared Hess, who I love, who made some of my favorite movies. All right, let's go faster. The Penguin, the TV show on HBO, I loved. The last couple episodes I felt a little rushed, but the first 4 episodes, I would say, of The Penguin, I think it's 8 episodes. The first 4 episodes of The Penguin, I loved. I was really into this TV show. The writing, it's a gangster, so if you're into that sort of thing, then it's good. The Penguin, right? It's Batman, but it's very grounded, right? There's no Galactus, there's no multiverse, there's none of that. If you didn't know Batman and the Penguin, you would just think that this was just another gangster movie or gangster TV show. And Colin Farrell does an amazing job. But again, the writing is there for me. I could see how people wouldn't like it. Andor, oh my God, season 2, 10 out of 10. I've talked about before, I'm pretty sure. I think Andor, even as a non-Star Wars sort of thing, is a good show. If it wasn't Star Wars related, I probably would have given it an 8. But since it's Star Wars related, and I'm into Star Wars, and I've been wanting a good Star Wars product for a long time, I loved it. I thought they nailed it. 10 out of 10. So good. I watched Alien Romulus, so this is the Alien movie where they're trying to return to its roots because there were complaints that Alien was kind of getting away from its roots. And yeah, it's watchable. It's 6 out of 10. At the end, it gets, there's like, I remember thinking there were like 10 different endings, and maybe that's kind of a return to form as well. But, it's watchable. It's not amazing. I don't know if it was made to be amazing. I loved the Superman movie. I gave it an 8 out of 10. A lot of people don't like it, apparently. I loved it. I don't know if it's because I grew up with the Christopher Reeves, whichever one of those. It felt like a riff on that. I loved Mr. Fantastic. I liked that. I liked the relationship between Clark and Lois Lane. I don't know. This movie, it really worked on me. 8 out of 10. A documentary about the college murders in Idaho. It's called One Night in Idaho, the college murders. If you know this story, it's actually a miniseries, 4 episodes. I gave it a 5 out of 10. It's fine. It's a horrible story about these college kids who get murdered kind of randomly by this guy that breaks into the house. Anyway, I rewatched The Suicide Squad from 2021. Is this another James Gunn? Yeah. So loved it. 7 out of 10. Solid movie. I watched Cunk on Life, if you're familiar with Cunk, the comedian in Britain. And I gave it a 7 out of 10. I have heard that a lot of people don't like this comedian. She's kind of like a Stephen Colbert character, right? Where she's playing a character, or also kind of like Borat in a way. Anyway, I liked it. I thought it was funny. I rewatched a movie from 1990 called My Blue Heaven. Wait, have I already done this sort of episode? I feel like I've already talked about this. I'm just going to do a couple more because I feel like I've already done an episode, because I feel like I've talked about this movie on the podcast. Anyway, Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, Joan Cusack, classic movie for me. I remember watching it back in the day. It's a comedy about a gangster who goes into protective witness program, right? What do they call it? And I thought it was funny. The Mission Impossible movie, a lot of people didn't like it. I gave it a 7 out of 10. And I'm not a big fan of the Mission Impossible series, so if I'm giving it a 7 out of 10, I think that says something. Oh my God, have I talked about The Residents? I think I have, but I just want to talk about it again. That Netflix TV show, 8 episodes, 10 out of 10, perfect TV show. Oh my God, I watched it 3 times through. The Residents TV show, I can't talk. I loved that TV show. Oh my God, 10 out of 10, 8 episodes. I feel like I'm rambling because I am. Perfect script, the editing, the acting, the story, everything. How do you wrap up a whodunit? It's always hard, but I thought they did it well enough anyway. If you start thinking about the ending, you start going, wait, what? But I think I'm willing to forgive that, because that's not really the point. The point isn't like, does the whodunit make all the logical sense in the world? I mean, there's an episode toward the end, like maybe episode 6 or something, where they completely move away from the main characters and focus on these 2 other characters. And it's this beautiful, like, story between these 2 workers who work in the White House. And it's so perfect. Everything about that show, just so great. I rewatched the movie called Phenomenon from 1996 with John Travolta. Horrible movie. 3 out of 10. Just goofy. I watched Gulliver's Travels with Jack Black. Again, I don't think that's for me. I think it's made for kids. 3 out of 10. Not good. I watched Stay Tuned, I'm now remembering, with John Ritter and Pam Dauber, if you know, from 1992. And essentially it's about this, there's a weird time in American society where, because if you don't know, in the 80s, most people didn't have cable. Most people were just using their antenna to get the regular TV channels. And TV wasn't really a big deal in people's lives, Like, I think my dad probably watched golf once a month. And that was probably, he would sit down and watch golf for an hour or 2 once a month. And he never watched, and he was a 40-year-old American man. And he, how many 40-year-old American men today only watch 2 hours of TV a month, right? Including internet and, blah, blah, blah. Screen time. And with cable, people started to get cable, and we couldn't get cable because we lived too far in suburbia that the actual cable wasn't on our street, so we couldn't get it. But eventually we did. And there was this weird time where all of a sudden we were just like, catapulted into the media landscape as a society. And you had all these channels, like, wait, 30 channels or 20 or even just like 15 channels? You're like, how could I possibly run out of things to watch? And then, HBO and Showtime and VHS was like exploding at the time. And all, because I remember when in Issaquah, where I grew up, there was one tiny little VHS rental store, and it had, I'm not even joking, it probably had like 18 movies, like literally 18 cassettes that you could rent because so few people had VHS, players at home. And you would go in and you would rent one of the 18 movies and bring it home and watch it. And then, seeing that whole thing explode and blockbuster movies and everything. And then there was this thing called satellite TV, which they still have, I think. But that's when things really exploded, because you would have so many channels from around the world, right? And it was a niche thing. Only some people had it, because in the beginning you had to get these giant dishes. It's not like those little dishes you'll see today. It was like a huge dish, like a truck or something. And I remember it just seemed like a magical device that you could. It seemed like you could watch TV from around the world. It sort of felt like the internet, where you felt connected to the whole world. And this movie was made in that explosion. So there's a couple that has satellite TV, and they get sucked into the satellite TV world, and they have to survive and sort of get out. That's the whole movie. Anyway, so rewatching this movie last year, stay tuned, it reminded me of that time, this sort of little chapter of American society where satellite TV was like all the rage. It was just before the internet. And also, I kind of feel like cable made up for the differences. They started laying cable further out into suburbia, and they started including more channels, because I feel like by the late 90s, people weren't really talking about satellite as much. Anyway, going through this, Youth in Revolt. I love this movie. I could see how people wouldn't like it. Michael Cera, it's unique. I'll just say that. But I give it a 10 out of 10. I think it's a perfect movie. But I could see how most people wouldn't like it. I rewatched Spies Like Us from 1985. Gave it a 5 out of 10. It's fine. Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, John Landis. I watched the Black Mirror episodes and rated all of those. I'll just give a range from 5 to 10. Eulogy being my favorite one from this most recent season. I rewatched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from 2005, gave it a 5 out of 10. I rewatched Old School, the comedy, and downgraded it, I think, from a 7 to a 6 upon rewatch. I finally watched Popstar, Never Stop Stopping with Andy Samberg, right? And his two buddies, and 6 out of 10. I think I'm a little too old for this movie. I thought it was fine. I finally watched MacGruber from 2010. For those who know this movie, you know how awesome it is, and it is. It holds it 7 out of 10. I rewatched The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent from a few years ago and upgraded it, I think, from an 8 to a 9. This is Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal. It works on me. I watched G.I. Jane. I think maybe because of the whole thing with the slapping. I don't know. But 5 out of 10. I watched The Electric State, that Netflix movie that came out with Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown. And there are so many things good about this movie, but the story is pretty bad. And so I gave it a 1 out of 10. I finally watched Michael Clayton, which everyone said, oh my God, you have to watch Michael Clayton. I watched it because in watching Andor, the writer-director, he originally came on the scene with Michael Clayton in 2007. Watched it, and yeah, 7 out of 10. Good movie. I watched, what else? I'm looking at my list here. I think Warfare, 7 out of 10. I'll just go over the movies that came out this year. Warfare, not for everyone. I could see how a lot of people wouldn't like it. It's essentially just a recreation of an operation by a small squad of American soldiers, and it's a true story. And it's entertaining and yet informative and gripping, and it really tells you what war is like. And I have a friend who died in a similar kind of scenario as this movie, and it worked on me in that way. Other movies from this year. Adolescence, that show, I did a series on that. I gave it a 6 out of 10. because I think Adolescence, the TV series, is 4 episodes, and every episode is one long shot, right? And I think that, so when I rate it 6 out of 10, I'm saying that's the entertainment value. In terms of importance, I would give this like a 9 out of 10. You know what I mean? There's a different thing there. I think it's important to watch. Oh, I just want to talk about Grave of the Fireflies. I rewatch this movie every once in a while, 10 out of 10. It's hard to watch, but I love it. Other movies from this year. I'm looking. I've watched a lot of old movies or older movies. Kung Fu Panda, Incredibles 2, Penguins of Madagascar, 10 out of 10. Penguins of Madagascar, 10 out of 10. Incredibles 2, 8 out of 10. The Lego Movie, 8 out of 10. The new Twisters movie, 1 out of 10. Terrible. Legally Blonde, the original, 8 out of 10. Blades of Glory, comedy, Will Ferrell, 10 out of 10. Notting Hill, perfect movie, 10 out of 10. I watch this movie every 6 months. Notting Hill, perfect movie. I think that might be all the movies from 2025 that I have rated on IMDb, and that is that. Let me know what movies you saw in the comment section, or an email or whatever, or on Patreon. You can comment. So you can comment on Patreon, you can comment on YouTube, and you can email us. That's the only ways you can spout off. Now, if you disagree with me on things, that's expected, because no two lists or ratings or list of ratings is the same. And there's something weird when people, like my whole thing about weapons and everything. It's weird. It's like with music or paintings, like art that you hang on the wall. Two people can disagree. One person looks at the painting like, "Ooh, I like this." The other person's like, "Yeah." And for whatever reason, those two people, they're fine. But when it comes to movies, there's something weird. Like, two people will watch a movie. One person will be like, "Oh my God, it was good." Another person will be like, "I didn't like that." For some reason, both people will take it personally. And I don't understand that. I do this too, but I'm trying not to. So don't take it personally. If you loved Weapons, or you loved The Lighthouse, or you hated Avatar or whatever, that's normal. And it doesn't say anything about our connection or really anything. It's the mood we're in, or the type of stuff we're into, or the stories we like, or whatever, So take a deep breath. We're all fine. But I'm thankful that we have all of these people making art and giving us 90 or sometimes 3.5 hours of entertainment that is new and fresh and interesting and yet feels familiar. I'm thankful that YouTube has The Apartment that's just waiting for me to watch from 1960. I'm thankful for screenwriters and all the people who work on these movies, the key grip and the camera people and the editors and the writers and the producers and the directors and the actors. And, everyone's working their ass off to make these things. And I'm glad that they're doing it. And take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.